This is The Wrench in the Machine, written by Bonsard Bokel and edited by Gene Wilkins. If you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to like and subscribe and press that bell button. If you want to support the series, you can either do so on Subscribestar or Patreon. And if you want to read along, we now have a store page on associationofishtar.com, where you can get bonus material you will not get anywhere else. In our previous episode, we learned everything the Association of Ishtar knows about the mysterious assassin designated S-36. Now we continue Aldborough's ongoing investigation into the murderer of Inspector Bixby. But first, we continue his conversation with Associate 321. What is this strange associate from the Americas doing in Dover?
This is her, Aldborough mumbled as he laid down the file. An assassin who travels from one world to the next. And then there was the mention of Dr. Genever. Boerhaave was Dr. Genever. But did 321 know? Aldborough looked at the associate. What is S-36 doing in Dover? 321 leaned over the table. That is what we need to find out. But according to this, she is after your organization specifically. If that assumption is correct, then why did she appear at the docks? A broad smile appeared on the associate's face. Truth be told, I was quite pleased with your request to speak to me. Is that so? First of all, secrecy is not our goal, Inspector, 321 said reassuringly. Secrecy is but a means to an end. Did you see the autopsy report of the dock killings? Aldborough shook his head. No, I was recovering in the hospital. The associate looked thoughtfully at the hook on Aldborough's wrist. Yes, he whispered, and reached into the bag again. Here it is. On the table he laid out some photos. Aldborough bent over slightly. These were pictures of the crime scene at the docks, including one of Bixby's body. Without saying a word, he picked up the image of his dead colleague, who sat with his back against the locomotive. Associate 321 sat nonchalantly on the edge of the table and cleared his throat. I'm sorry you had to see this again, but I want you to remember what happened. In your statement you mentioned a man who saved you. Yes, answered Aldborough suspiciously. Something about that question baffled the inspector. Didn't he know about the associate at the scene of the murders? 321 leaned toward him. Did you talk with him? Aldborough snapped out of his thoughts. No. I lost consciousness. I just recalled the mask and his peculiar weapon, like I mentioned in my statement. The associate nodded and reached down and shoved one of the photos in front of Aldborough. I want you to look at the photo of this victim, Mr. Lidgett, especially what he has on his arm. Aldborough studied the image. It was the well-dressed gentleman he observed that evening. In the photo, the victim had a very elaborate hand prosthesis with 3 grabbing fingers, which made the inspector kinda jealous. He had seen similar designs in the past, but this one seemed more elaborate. Thin cables and springs running underneath the exterior. They're functional, in case you're wondering, said the associate as Aldborough attempted to slide aside one of the photos with his hook. The inspector leaned back. Where did this prosthetic come from? The associate groaned softly as he got off the desk and walked stiffly back to his chair. There's only one group we know of who has the knowledge to make such a prosthesis. An esoteric organization known as the Followers of the Signal. Mr. Lidgett happened to be a member. Are you familiar with them? He asked, curiously. Aldborough crossed his arms. Well, yes. They are transhumanist, aren't they? Asked Aldborough, even though he really didn't know what that meant. The Signalites have a lot of famous actors and scientists. Isn't that playwright that moved over the Atlantic, Bosico, a member? Indeed. 321 groaned. We have some of them in the association as well. Miss Boerhaave among them. The doll doctor is? Stunned by this revelation, Aldborough looked back at the photo of the prosthesis. It wasn't a stretch to think that the Signalites could create something like those wrist blades. It would make sense, Aldborough thought out loud. What do you think is the relationship between her and the Frenchman? His number used to be 45, Associate 321 revealed. Aldborough needed a moment to process that. The man inside that locker. That's right. He was what we call a lost number, 321 explained. An associate who betrayed his vow years ago. For his transgressions, he was put on ice a few weeks back. In France, said Albo, perplexed. You knew he had something inside his head, didn't you? We suspected something, yes, 321 admitted as he sat down. That is why we went to the trouble of transporting his body to one of our, special facilities, he continued evasively. And that's why we must recover Boerhaven and his item as quickly as possible. We have no idea of its significance at this point, or why Boerhaven has not returned it to us. Alborough crossed his arms. Are you implying she's a lost number? I am implying we can't rule out the possibility. Mechanically, Alborough straightened himself in a chair, thinking of this woman Boerhaven, or Dr. Genever, was a traitor. Then, was the associate who saved Alborough from S-36 an accomplice? He cleared his throat. What's S-36 part in all this? She hunts associates, 321 answered bluntly. She knew we would go after that item. The inspector blinked. You mean it's bait? That simple? Some people just need a simple purpose, 321 responded. Something about that statement made Alborough's blood pressure rise. That is why she murdered 2 men at the station? Just for that? He asked indignantly. And Bigsby? Why? What have you done that she hates you so much? The question made the associate pause. Once again he reached for his bag, took out another folder and like a clerk browsed its contents with an air of indifference. I read your file, Inspector, he began coldly, speaking as if it was a performance review. Despite your rather notorious early career, you have been commended, and you even turned down promotions. 321 peered from beneath his eyebrows at Alborough. Now seems to be a very good time to take that offer, the associate said pedantically. Have you considered it? No, Alborough said distrustfully. He felt that he was being baited. Why have you not taken that promotion? 321 asked, puzzled. You're fully committed, so responsibility isn't the issue. You have no family. You do have the skills and the personality. There's no practical reasons why you shouldn't. What is holding you back? Alborough sniffed his nose. I just don't think it's for me. With a loud bang, 321 slammed the folder shut. That's a coward's reply, Mr. Alborough. Alborough sprang from his chair. How dare you judge me? How dare you judge me? The associate raised his voice. On the contrary, he responded indignantly. I want to know how committed you are. Let me tell you about how I got here, he began. I joined the West Africa Squadron for Her Majesty because I wanted retribution. But before I got to my first slave trader, I got a bullet in my leg. And it has been lodged in there ever since. But I kept serving in the West Africa Squadron despite my injury, until I found a new calling and took my vow as an associate. Not understanding the point of this tale, Alborough simply responded with, West Africa Squadron. That's commendable. 321 got up and leaned forward. 321 got up and leaning forward looked Alborough in the eyes. I'm not seeking your approval, Inspector. The point is, I learned something about myself. After a brief pause, he continued, The truth is, I didn't give a damn about the cause. I cared about killing. Revenge is a very powerful motivator, Mr. Alborough. It makes it quite easy to assume you can do no wrong, as long as you target the right people. That made Alborough pause. Well, if your question is if I have been there. Yes, he nodded admittedly. Yes, I have. You have? 321 But what drives you now, David? How motivated are you now, Inspector, to apprehend those responsible for the deaths? Albaro contemplated the question for a moment as he stared back in the man's eyebrows. There was something about them that disturbed him greatly, like the bottom of a pit that was shrouded in darkness. "It's the only thing that can help me get up in the morning right now," he said. "It should have been me who she killed." There was a moment of silence. It pained him to say it out loud. Albaro finished his thought. "I think she didn't even consider me a threat." 321 straightened himself. "Your record would disagree with that, Inspector." Albaro nodded with a dark frown on his face. "Yes, maybe old age has made me soft." The corners of the associate's mouth curled up again. "Good," he said with a wild, pearly smile. "I want you to join me at the victim's, Mr. Lidgett's, home. I want to see how you work." Surprised by the request, Albaro nodded modestly. "Very well, then." The associate slapped his hands together. "Good. I expect to see you there at 10 in the morning." The gentle splashing of raindrops on the cobblestone street was a pleasant distraction as Albaro made his way back home. But it did not keep him from getting lost in thought as he contemplated what his associate had told him. Was this Boerhaave, this Dr. Genever, a traitor in cahoots with S-36? He went over the events that transpired at the docks. Boerhaave just extracted the receiver from the body. The wavecaster had announced S-36's presence. Then Boerhaave fled, and her carriage left the scene in a hurry, nearly colliding with the rails. Her flight might have been for show, but intended for whom, exactly? His mind conjured up another scenario. Boerhaave was preparing to leave when she heard the melody of Roses in the Rain, fled to the carriage and told the driver to make haste, causing them to nearly crash as they fled. But then, why did S-36 attack? The numbers on the wavecaster, he pondered. The numbers on the wavecaster, he pondered. Did one of those numbers happen to be Genever's? The numbers on the wavecaster, he pondered. Did one of those numbers happen to be Genever's? Then Albaro recalled the statement by Associate 8 inside the file.
"She has your number too, Doctor."
The inspector's eyes widened. Boerhaave has a number, he thought out loud. Back home, Albaro stormed through the front door hoping Igraine would be there. The moment he entered, the sound of dog paws approached. The mutt came running in a strange way of his and inspected Albaro from a distance before heading back inside the living room. There the girl sat at a table, bent over a drawing she was working on, while the dog lay behind her enthusiastically gnawing at a thick branch that barely fitted between his jaws. "You're still here," Albaro said, relieved.
"It's raining outside,"
she responded with a puzzled expression on her face.
"Had Miss Appletree made dinner?"
"Well, I'm glad," he said, while hastily pulling up a chair and sat down. "We need to talk about Dr. Genever, or whatever her name is. I spoke to a certain Associate 321 today." She continued drawing.
"Good for you."
"He claims the doctor is a traitor." The mutt looked up from the branch he was gnawing on when Igraine slammed her hands on the table.
"She would never betray the association."
"I believe you," he reassured her. "A matter of fact, I think she's in grave danger. Does Dr. Genever have a number like the other associates?" Igraine slowly turned her head, like the thought never occurred to her.
"No, I don't think so. Why?"
"Maybe it's not important. What has he been up to the last few weeks?"
"I don't know. All she said she would be away for a while. That was half a year ago,"
she added softly. Her disappointment was palpable. "You missed her, didn't you?" She ignored his statement.
"She is with this group now."
"What group?"
"I think those followers of the signal. I know it from some wave celebrity who is a member."
"Yes, that is right," he exclaimed, knowing he was onto something now.
"That doesn't make you a traitor,"
Igraine protested. Albaro curbed his enthusiasm. "All right, let's forget about that for now. What was Genever doing?"
"She visited a manor. It is in South London, where it is really busy, so I could not get near the place without being seen. And they have some creepy patients."
"Creepy how?"
"You know, like they got out of prison, and many are maimed. I think they are getting prostheses there."
That is very generous of them. Did she meet some people on a regular basis? Igraine crossed her arms and stared at the table.
Oui.
Arboro leaned forward toward her. Well, who then?
Some of those cult members, I think. But they're always met inside the toy store.
Did one of them have a hand prosthesis? She nodded.
Yeah.
Describe it to me.
Didn't look that special. It was a 3-fingered design, but...
He raised an eyebrow. But what?
Sometimes I saw them come out of the toy store, but I never saw them enter,
she said ominously. How do you mean?
There is no back door,
Igraine emphasized.
The only way in is through the front.
So you're saying there is a secret passage?
Unless you have a better idea?
Alboro looked out of the small window above the kitchen till. Night approached. He got up and got his bowler bag hat on. I'll go and have a look in the store. The mud jumped to its feet as Igraine stood up.
I'll go with you.
No, he said resolutely.
If there is a secret space, you need me to get in.
The inspector blinked while considering it. Then he picked up another frock coat from the rack on the wall. Fine then, he said as he threw the coat her way. Igraine frowned.
What should I do with these?
You put it on. Dress how you like when you're on your own, but when you work with me, at least attempt to be inconspicuous. The twilight turned the street of Dover to a purplish hue as they walked to Hendrik's Dollhaven. Alboro hoped the mud didn't tear apart his house while they were out. Meanwhile, Igraine walked beside him, looking rather uncomfortable in that tweed frock coat that reached all the way to her ankles. Still, he couldn't help but feel she looked adorable with the matching flat cap on her freckled head. Together they walked awkwardly down the street without saying a single word to each other. The inspector didn't really know how to deal with children, let alone one that wasn't even from this world. So, when will you go home again? He asked. She hesitated.
Couple of days.
What is your home like? She looked down.
It's complicated. I guess it's kinda like an orphanage, or...
She didn't finish the sentence.
It's a special place,
she finally said. What happened to your parents?
Nothing,
is all she said.
What about yours?
Caught off guard, he mumbled. Well, I never met my mother. My father raised me alone. I thought I spent most of my time at a boarding school. After that, I learned to become a copper like him.
Where is he now?
The inspector contemplated his answer. He is dead. Killed while on patrol.
Oh.
She seemed a bit embarrassed now.
Did you find the killer?
He sighed. I looked, but no, he confessed. I kept investigating for many years.
You stopped?
Yes, he began. I was angry for many years. I suppose I still am. But I let it dominate my life in such a way He paused for a moment. I had to forgive him in order to move on.
You forgave your father's murderer?
She sounded aghast. I did, he confessed. I needed to do it in order to move on, lest I become like his murderer.
Wait, what about the stabber?
She asked. Huh?
Will you forgive the stabber for what she has done?
Well, the memory of how S-36 smiled when she killed Bixby sprang to mind. I can only forgive her for what she has done to me, Alboro answered as he showed her his hook.
But will you?
She insisted. Alboro did not know how to respond. She has a lot to answer for, he mumbled. Why do you think she does it? He asked. Why does he hate the Association so much? Igraine remained awkwardly silent. So awkward, in fact, they didn't arrive a moment too soon at the Dollhaven. Inside, they looked for a way past all the furniture with a single beam of light from his electric lantern. Meanwhile, the white of the stuffed animal's grin stood out from the shadows while beady eyes reflected the orange light of the street lamps. How could Boerhaave stand all these lifeless eyes, he wondered, and looked the other way. Suddenly, he noticed a bright eye staring at him from the dark. He jumped back, knocking over a table, and as he tumbled to the ground, he was covered by various plush animals.
Huh?
Igraine looked at him as if paralyzed. What's wrong? Her left eye shone like a bright blue diamond in the darkness. Nothing, he lied, brushing the toys away. I tripped, that's all. At the back, they investigated the interior of the storage for any concealed features, but all we could see were baskets filled with all manner of cloth, beads, and doll parts. Meanwhile, cracked and dirty covered faces observed them from the shelves. How were they supposed to find anything?
There it is,
Igraine said while pointing at a small wall cabinet.
I recognize that shape.
She opened its door and revealed a console behind it. It looked similar to the dials on the safe, but there were also several hinges. You've seen this before.
Something like it.
Albaro looked on, feeling a bit useless. You think you can open it? She smirked.
I open locks like these all the time.
After a couple of minutes there was a click, and a floor hatch popped up slightly. The inspector lifted the panel and revealed a shallow staircase with another door at the end. Well, you can always go and work as a locksmith, he said, impressed. Her smile disappeared.
Sure,
Igraine responded curtly and went down the stairs. Albaro shook his head. There was no way to encourage her, was there? The scent of mildew greeted them as they pushed the door open and peered inside the darkness. Albaro aimed his lantern and illuminated the chamber. It was a fully furnished room which included some worn-out Baroque seats and curtains to conceal the wall. Despite the classy, be it dilapidated furnishing, it still smelled and felt like a basement, and in one place mushrooms grew out of the wall. It was humid and cold, and the old Baroque couch felt clammy when he touched the sunken-in seating. How did they fit this thing through that door? He wondered out loud. Igraine walked to the back of the room, where a faded red curtain obscured the wall. She looked behind the red cloth and moved it aside to reveal another door that was being eaten away by mold climbing up from the bottom. Well, that solves that mystery, he said. But what do you think they were doing here? Randomly shone his lantern around till he spotted a light fixture above the desk, and with a flip of a switch, the orange light revealed the interior of the hideout. On a table lay a pile of folders and office supplies. But what stood out was a rectangular shape in the layers of dust covering the desk, like the print of a cabinet or box that used to stand in that place. Whatever it contained, it must have been more important than the folders laying about. Then he noticed an electric plug stuck between the wall and the cabinets beside the desk. He used his hook to reach behind the furniture to get a hold of the cable, and once he managed to hold the cable between his fingers, he inspected the odd plug at the end.
It's a radio plug,
Igraine said. Oh, is that so? Why would they take the wavecaster? Don't they need the power cable?
Igraine corrected him. That's not the power cable. It's a coaxial cable to receive telegraphic signals. It's probably connected inside the wall somewhere.
Still, why did they take the wavecaster with them?
Maybe they really like those Shade reruns,
she answered, aloof. Right. The inspector mumbled as he browsed the files. These contained newspaper clippings, map of London's neighbourhoods, unnamed schedules and timetables, but without context, these were useless. He stopped browsing when one of the files grabbed his attention. It was the same type of cover as the association file he held this morning, labeled C33. He showed it to Igraine. Do you know what this is? Igraine's eyes became larger.
It's an association file. C stands for construct, she said. It's probably about a device or something.
Albaro opened it and went over the text. You have been listening to a chapter of The Wrench in the Machine by Bonsard Bokel. If you enjoy these narrations and want us to improve our content, please consider buying our publications or support us through Subscribestar or PayPal, like these generous patrons. Apart from being mentioned in the credits, There are also other various reward tiers that include access to original art, coloring books, and digital publications.